Hello, and welcome to Lee's Rules Corner. What we're going to be doing for the upcoming season is we're going to be breaking down all of the skills for League. As most of you know, I am the Calgary Battletech League Commissioner, as well as one half of the Uncivil Discourse team. With that, I've done a lot of work with getting the League packet ready, and a lot of extra work with my teammates Brett and Jeff to get things errated and changed due to your suggestions from last season. Now we have changed some skills, rewritten them, skill pointed them, and tried to make it a little bit easier for players to use. We've even removed a few skills to try to make it a little bit easier, as some skills just simply weren't being purchased. To start with, we're going to have to go over a few of the basic setups on how skill points are spent and how they're earned.
After each match, stables will be issued 4 points regardless of a win or loss, up to a maximum of 32 points. A short league season could have less than 32 points, while a longer one will be capped at 32 to keep the number of skills per pilot from getting unwieldy. Each lance will have an experience bank that they can draw from after a match is complete. Spends must be submitted 1 week after the last match was played, or the points will be withheld in the bank until the following match. Unused points are left in the bank for later use, but once a skill is being purchased, those points are considered spent for good. The pilot will retain the skill for the remainder of the league and playoffs. A bank count will not be able to hold more than 10 points at any one time. During spending, no primary skill may be purchased more than twice by a lance, and no secondary skill may be duplicated within a lance, except with the use of the duplicate skill. The gunnery skill cannot be mixed with an effective gunnery skill, and you cannot have more than one effective gunnery skill on the same mech. Engineering skills cannot be combined, as well as piloting effective skills can also not be combined. In short, if two skills function similarly or modify the same aspect of the game, they cannot be stacked on the same unit unless specifically mentioned in the skill itself.
This should explain how we issue the points to the players, as well as put the groundwork on how and when those points will be spent. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to the primary skills, and they've changed a little bit. We now have Gunnery, Piloting, Edge, and Tactics.
Gunnery, 6 points. This skill grants the pilot a -1 to hit modifier for any missile, ballistic, or energy weapon attacks they may make during the weapon attack phase.
This is the most useful gunnery skill in the game. With no penalties and no weird dynamics to make it work, it simply lowers your base gunnery by 1 point.
Piloting, 5 points. The piloting base score is now lowered by 1 for all piloting/physical attack rolls. Piloting cannot be combined with any physical attack skill for the purpose of making melee attacks. While the mech warrior could have both a physical attack skill and piloting, the mech warrior must choose between the two when making a melee attack during the physical attack phase.
This skill is quite often overlooked compared to the gunnery skill. However, it's extremely useful and affects a great number of situations in League, from trying to avoid that falling down from 20 plus damage, or if you're going to hit that really important death from above, or that kick from 1 elevation up.
Tactics, 4 points. The pilot, if they have a valid line of sight to an enemy unit, adds +1 to the lance initiative roll, and a +1 to its personal initiative roll against lancemates. The pilot must use their tactics skill when these conditions are met.
This is a great skill for anybody who wants to improve their movement in the lance. Moving a little bit later is always helpful. It also improves their overall lance initiative by 1, making sure that the opponent is more likely to have to move first. However, as written, it also states that you have to have line of sight on at least one of your enemy mechs, so positioning is key.
Edge, 4 points. This skill is representative of the pilot's luck or ability to avoid disaster. The pilot can, once per match, reroll anything.
This is easily the best skill in the game, as it allows you to reroll anything. Only once per game, but anything that you like. Now, primary skills are the most overall game-changing skills, with very few drawbacks, but they are expensive, and they don't have a lot of the fun quirks that secondary skills have. When we get to talking about them later, we'll explain some of those. They do have a nice feature that secondary skills don't have, though. You can duplicate them in your lance without having to buy the duplicate skill. So therefore you could have 2 gunneries or in your lance, or 2 edges. Now, secondary skills are way more complex than the primary ones, normally with a hindrance or 2 that comes with the benefit. As no 2 mech warriors are same, usually you can't purchase these skills for different pilots in your lance. The skills are further different from the primary skills as they are broken into categories based on what they change in game. These are effective gunnery skills, mobility skills, physical attack skills, weapon skills, general skills, and finally faction-specific skills. We're going to go over the effective gunnery skills today, and then follow up on the other categories in future videos.
Effective gunnery skills. These skills are gunnery traits that a warrior has, much like standard gunnery. Unlike gunnery, which can be used each and every single time the mech warrior pulls the trigger on any weapon, these skills are dependent on certain criteria being met before an attack bonus is applied during an attack. While not as powerful as straight gunnery, when in combination with other skills, they can be quite effective. Their low costs can also make them more appealing. Caged Rat, 2 points. This pilot, if in a damaged mech, fights with desperation, reflective of the situation. If a mech has taken any critical hits, the pilot gets a -1 to hit modifier for all weapon attacks it makes for the rest of the match.
This is a long game style skill. It requires you to first have taken a critical hit somewhere on your mech to be activated. However, once it is activated, it could be the difference between losing the match and pulling that victory out of your hat.
Point Blank, 2 points. This skill allows a pilot to all but ignore the minimum range modifiers for any ballistic or energy weapon. On such weapons, the player divides the minimum range modifier by 2 and rounds fractions down. This total is the new minimum range modifier for the weapon in question. This skill does not affect missile weapons in any way.
This skill isn't a direct gunnery skill, but it does make those ballistic and energy weapons with minimum ranges that much more effective. The 3 hex minimum of a PPC or the 4 hex minimum of an autocannon 2 are greatly reduced. This makes the weapon much more effective at close range and makes it a little bit more risky for opponents to charge you during the match.
Courage, 2 points. This ability gives the pilot the will to attack with little regard for his or her own safety. The result is a -1 to hit modifier for all weapon or physical attacks attempted by this unit, and any weapon or physical attacks attempted against this unit also receive a -1 to hit modifier. Once invoked, Courage lasts for the remainder of the game. This skill cannot be combined with Camouflage, any of the physical attack skills, Sensor Ops, or Erratic Piloting.
This is an all or nothing gunnery skill that allows you to hit harder with both your physical attacks and weapons. However, once you've invoked it, it really allows your opponents to shoot back at you with effectiveness, so be ready when you activate it.
Hero Complex, 2 points. This pilot has a taste for the spotlight and a bad habit of saving their best for last. If, during a match, the lance this pilot belongs to finds itself outnumbered, the warrior will fight with a -1 to hit modifier for all weapons and physical attacks. This will last until A, during the end phase of a turn the 2 opposing sides are at even strength, or B, during the end phase of a turn the opposition is at a numerical disadvantage. This skill cannot be combined with piloting, any physical attack skills, or courage.
This is the first complex skill that requires a little bit of explanation, and is only triggered when your side is down a mech and losing, and is then lost once you've tied up the game or in fact start winning. But then you regain it if you happen to fall back behind. It's a great skill if you're an aggressive player that is willing to lose a mech or 2 to crush the enemy and beat them. However, if you're a defensive player who wants to stand back and grind your opponent down over a long drawn out battle, this may not be the skill for you, as it doesn't really go into effect until the very end of the game.
Creeping Doom, 3 points. This pilot prefers slow advances. As such, this skill grants the pilot a -1 to hit modifier for ranged weapons if the mech walked during the movement phase. This skill cannot be combined with camouflage or any of the mobility skills.
While the skill does give you a bonus to hit, you are restricted on your movement to be able to use it. There isn't any penalty for running or jumping, but you're not going to get your -1 bonus to hit if you've used anything faster than a walk.
Forest Fire, 3 points. This skill allows a mech warrior to make a best guess when attempting weapon attacks through either trees or smoke hexes. After a valid line of sight has been determined, the player may apply a -1 to hit modifier if a tree or smoke hex lies along the line of fire or in the target hex. The player may also apply a -1 modifier if it is standing in a smoke hex. In addition, if a mech is standing in a smoke hex and it can also trace a valid line of sight through smoke or trees, it can stack both benefits together.
This skill won't make trees or smoke invisible, so you're still going to need line of sight if you want to shoot that Centurion. But it does make it easier to hit them if you can see them through the haze.
Wide Open, 3 points. This mech warrior has perfected his gunnery on the wide open plains. When attempting weapon attacks, the player may apply a -1 to hit modifier if there is no intervening terrain along the line of fire or in the target hex.
This is pretty much the yin to Forest Fire's yang, as you're more accurate when there's nothing between you and your opponent. So elevation or an open field is your best friend. While there are no penalties for when the skill isn't active, it is very situational, and therefore it's not always the most useful skill in the long run.
Heat Surfer, 3 points. When a mech overheats, the first two effects are negative modifiers to movement and gunnery. This skill allows a pilot who has overheated their mech to take an additional penalty in movement in order to negate the penalty to hit. For example, at heat level 8, a mech would normally suffer a -1 movement point penalty and a +1 to hit penalty. Instead, the pilot could take a -2 movement point penalty in place of the standard +1 to hit penalty. A pilot cannot change the heat scale penalty by either movement points or to hit modifiers by more than 1, nor may they reduce their available movement point allowance below 1. This skill must be announced before the following turn's movement phase.
This skill is one of the more complex ones, but it has a pretty simple explanation. You can take an extra -1 to your movement speed instead of the +1 penalty to your gunnery. Please remember to recalculate your running speed because it is calculated at 1.5 times your walking speed. So it does make a difference, especially when you go down 2 points.
Long Rifle, 3 points. This pilot prefers to attack at long range, avoiding direct combat if at all possible. To reflect this in game play, apply a -1 to hit modifier to any attacks made by this mech warrior at long range. This benefit is offset by a +1 to attacks made at short range.
This is a fantastic skill for the LRM heavy based lances, as well as anything for direct fire support, as you gain a great benefit at long range, which is where you want to be shooting at the enemy with those weapons anyway. However, it can be a really harsh mistress once those enemies decide to charge up close, and you have to start counting that penalty.
Nearsighted, 3 points. This pilot prefers to attack at short range, up close and personal combat if at all possible. To reflect this in gameplay, apply a -1 to hit modifier to any attacks made by this mech warrior at short range. This benefit is offset by a +1 to attacks made at long range. This skill cannot be combined with Sniper.
This is another one of those yin-yang skills. Nearsighted does the opposite of what Long Rifle does, and benefits the players who like to stand on other people's toes while they're beating at them. I'm looking at you, Hunchback, you, Axeman, and you, Berserker pilots.
Anticipation, 3 points. This pilot is very adept at guessing where an opposing mech will end its movement. The target defensive movement modifier is modified by a -1 to hit to a maximum of 0. This skill has no effect on mechs that did not move during the movement phase, sufficient for a modifier or any terrain modifiers in the target hex, trees, smoke, etc. This skill can only reduce the movement modifier a target mech has achieved.
Now remember, the skill does not affect intervening terrain or if the opponent hasn't moved. So be wary who you decide to target with this skill because it may not have any effect at all.
Missile Specialist, 3 points. This pilot is quite good with missile weapons. Pilots with this skill may ignore the +1 modifier for attacking with MRMs, and reduce by 2 the minimum range modifier for attacking with LRMs.
Now, while this skill does not give you a gunnery benefit, it does greatly reduce the minimum range for LRMs. And, for those Draconis Combined pilots, they get to ignore that +1 penalty on their MRM fire.
Stand and Deliver, 4 points. This pilot prefers accuracy above most other considerations, sometimes blazing away on the line while holding firm. If this mech does not move during the movement phase, make all weapon attacks with a -1 to hit modifier. This skill cannot be used with Camouflage, Deja Vu, Marksman, or Sniper.
If you like to stand still and just lay waste to any or all that move into your kill zone, this is the skill for you.
Favored Weapon, 4 points. This pilot must designate one specific weapon type as their favorite. ER large lasers, LRM-20, autocannons, etc. The pilot will then be able to make all attacks with this weapon type at a -1 to hit modifier. The weapon must be 5 tons or heavier. Due to their devotion with the weapon of choice, all other weapons on the mech receive a +1 to hit modifier for this pilot. Favorite weapon may not be used with any physical attack skills.
This is the pinnacle of give and take weapon skills, as while you do get the bonus -1 to hit for your chosen weapons, you get penalties on everything else. If your mech has a lot of different weapon types, this probably isn't the skill for you, as while your chosen weapon might be able to hit better, everything else is penalized.
Hyperactive, 4 points. This pilot is very skilled at targeting enemy units while moving at top speed. Anytime this mech has used running movement during the movement phase, apply a -1 to hit modifier to the weapon's attacks for that turn. This skill may not be mixed with any of the mobility skills or with multitasking.
Your speedy medium mechs and your heavily armored close range mechs really benefit from this skill when you're moving around trying to angle in those shots and trying to close in for those close range kicks and shots.
Lethargic, 4 points. This pilot is very deliberate and cunning, making the most of their mech by treating warfare as an elaborate chess match. This mech warrior gains a -1 to hit modifier for any weapon attacks it makes, so long as it stood still or walked during the movement phase of the turn. Add an additional +1 modifier to any weapon attacks this mech makes if it either ran or jumped during the movement phase of this turn instead. This skill cannot be used with Camouflage, Deja Vu, Sniper, or Marksman.
This skill has quite a few requirements to work, however it's very simple. Standing still or walking gains you a -1 to hit bonus, where running or jumping ends up with a +1 penalty.
Mobile Fire, 4 points. This mech warrior sees clearly that the movement of their mech plays a big role in its life expectancy. This ability gives the pilot a -1 to hit modifier for weapon attacks after it has completed a jump in the movement phase. This skill has no effect on physical attack attempts. This skill cannot be used with multitasking or camouflage.
Mobile Fire is to jumping what Hyperactive is to running. It's a -1 to hit if you jump the mech. Enough said.
Personal Vendetta, 5 points. At the start of the match, this pilot chooses one opposing mech, to whom their wrath is directed. All attacks made in the weapon attack phase against this enemy mech pilot have a -2 to hit modifier. All other attacks this pilot makes against any other mech are calculated normally. This pilot will not ignore other targets of opportunity, even though they would rather attack their hated foe. Physical attacks are not affected by personal vendetta.
This is one of the skills that has a huge benefit, but it's only good for a portion of the battle. The skill has the highest gunnery change, but it's only active against a single mech, and once that mech is out of the game, it's done for the match.
Target lock, 5 points. This mech warrior can best be described as tenacious. The longer they have engaged in a battle against a single enemy unit, the better their weapons lock they are able to maintain. To reflect this in the CBL gameplay, consider the first turn as normal attacks. On the second turn, if the pilot scored a weapon hit, non-physical, in the previous turn, the pilot can target the same mech with a -1 to hit modifier in the following turn. If the pilot scores a hit during the second turn, the next turns will enjoy a -2 to hit modifier until the string is broken. The targeting lock is quite powerful, but it can be broken under certain circumstances noted below. The target is blocked from sight after the movement phase. The target was not hit by any weapons during the weapon attack phase. If less than 50% of fired pulse laser weapons actually strike the target. If this pilot attacked more than one target in the weapon attack phase. If the targeted mech is destroyed. Once the target lock is broken, the mech warrior can start a new one. Keep in mind that the mech warrior is free to fire at whatever target they choose. Maintaining the target lock is not a necessity if the current situation dictates. This skill cannot be used with determination, alpha strike, or accuracy.
Now this is the most complex effective gunnery skill that we have, and it's also the last one we have in this category. It could be swapped from opponent to opponent, but requires constant effective fire to be active. So pick your targets wisely and this will carry you to victory. So that completes our list of skills for this episode. I'd like to thank Brett and Jeff for all of their hard work in going over these skills and making them make sense and adjusting the point cost to make them more feasible for our economy. We couldn't do all of this without your support, and we really appreciate all of your feedback. Remember to hit the like button. Remember to hit the subscribe button, share this with your friends, family, and everyone else who might be interested in Battletech, because we're trying to reach out to the greater community as well as our own internal Calgary Battletech League. I look forward to talking to you on the next episode of Lee's Rules Corner, and have yourself a great day.